Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And we are recording. Thumper Forge, welcome to Weird Web Radio, my friend. It is awesome to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
You better be excited. No.
Lonnie says I'm very excited.
Very excited. All right. Before we get to anything, I've got your bio here, courtesy of promo material from Llewellyn and your new book upcoming, The Chaos Apple, Magic and Discordianism for the Postmodern Witch. I dig it. When is that supposed to be out?
It will be out November 8th.
Like to buy, or can we pre-order it now?
Pre-order, it's available to pre-order on anywhere that you would like to pre-order things. And then November 8th is when it will start hitting shelves.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to read all about you to you. Thumper Forge from Houston, Texas, is a mischief-making mystic with a penchant for paradigm shifting and reality bending. A Gardnerian high priest, Minoan Brotherhood initiate, Discordian Episcopos. I've been trying to learn Spanish, so it's all Spanish looking to me now. He's been stirring the cauldron of chaos for over 2 decades. He lives in Houston, we did say that, where he manages a leather and fetishwear shop, offers geomantic and lithomantic readings, and blogs irreverently. You can find him at thumperforge.com, and you can find him where I found him on TikTok. Some of the most entertaining and informative TikToks I've ever seen.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I love it. I think it's great, especially when you get all snarky and go after people with their history nonsense.
I try so hard not to be snarky on TikTok, and I try to stay calm and reasonable. And I have all these self-imposed rules of, we don't stitch to the people we disagree with. We just make vague references to, I saw a video yesterday, because it makes me a little crazy when people unwittingly platform misinformation, or when they platform rage bait because it worked on them, and now I have a point to make and I'm going to yell at this person. And it's like, you were giving them so many views and so much attention for the thing that you don't want people to listen to. So I try to be the nice, reasonable one. I don't always succeed, but I make an effort. That's
an interesting way to go about it. I for people listening, I've started making TikTok videos. That's kind of new for me. And it never occurred to me to be careful about stitching with people I may not like, just referencing them that way. That's smart. I like that.
I learned that kind of the hard way, because I had made a video. One of the big topics that keeps coming up on the witchier side of TikTok is cultural appropriation. And people have very strong feelings about it, but they don't know what it is, but they have strong feelings. And so I made a video kind of explaining what the term actually means and kind of listing off some examples. And I got this notification that somebody had stitched to my video. And I was like, oh. So I opened his video, and it was just him yelling at the camera, "Your definition sucks." And I was like, oh. And then he proceeded to kind of mansplain cultural appropriation using the exact same definition. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is a bit silly, and you are handing over engagement to me by showing the world how upset you got about my definition. Right. And I don't want to do that back to you. So that was my lesson.
Well, if you don't mind, how do you define cultural appropriation, since it come up and it is a popular topic?
It is. I define cultural appropriation as an interaction between a dominant group and a marginalized group. And so appropriation occurs when a dominant group adopts a tradition or a practice or a fashion out of context from a marginalized group, and then either denies the marginalized group access to that artifact, or condemns the marginalized group for continuing to engage with the artifact, or pretends that the artifact did not originate with the marginalized group. Mm-hmm. Music is always the best example when we think of, like, you know, we look at the music of Elvis Presley or the Beatles, and, you know, somebody will adore Elvis, but think that R&B is like, will condemn R&B music for being too ghetto or too racially charged or whatever. Or they will be like, Elvis came up with it all by himself. He came up with all of that. He didn't steal from anyone. He was a musical prodigy. And then just kind of like, we're just going to wipe the roots of it away and pretend that this was all, you know. And we see that with, we see that in pagan and occult spaces, not to the extent that people believe it happens, and then not really necessarily where it happens, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Where we kind of, as a community, we have groups that we say, oh, those are the appropriators. But when you pull back the curtains on kind of individual practices, somebody saying, I'm a real witch and I only practice folkloric witchcraft, and I'm like, yeah, all of this came out of hoodoo and was uploaded to the internet from a correspondence course in 2006, and nobody documented it. But yeah, the ancient Saxon witches were not making sour jars and hot foot powder, you know. And so people will say, oh, Wicca is cultural appropriation. Look how appropriated that is. And they're not looking at all at their own practices that are full of appropriated things.
Right.
So that gets me riled up.
And that's fair. I mean, a couple episodes ago, Aiden Walker and we really dug into it. And Aiden was even talking about how, you know, of course, touching on subjects you just did in a similar way. But he even got into, you know, like how he was explaining, if I remember right, his early training in the fairy tradition of witchcraft, you know, the FERI fairy tradition, right?
The Anderson fairy,
Anderson fairy, how people could have nitpicked things out of there and called themselves something else. And he says, even that is a kind of minor form of cultural appropriation, because you're taking things from an established tradition of some kind and then taking it away from there into your practice and then calling it something else, but never giving credit or never giving source or anything, you know, and that gets into some problematic areas as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think you'd be a good person to ask this, thinking about cultural appropriation. I'm thinking back to the 90s Wiccan books, right? The DJ Conways and the Eden McCoys and those folks. The all gods are one god, all goddesses are one goddess, and you have the same ritual in these books, whether you're calling on Isis or Ishtar or Epona or Brigid or Freya, you know, like as if they're just interchangeable names. Would you have considered that some kind of cultural appropriation?
It's not quite appropriation, because what it's mostly similar to is the idea of interpretatia romana, which is where way back in the old timey days, as the Roman Empire was spreading and they would encounter a culture, and you know that culture would have their own religion and their own gods, and the Romans would go, well, that's really Jupiter, and that's really Minerva, and that's really Mercury. You're already worshiping our gods, and that's kind of how they would assimilate is overtaking these cultures and then convincing them that they were already part of the Roman religious structure. And so Wicca in the 90s, when it was sort of that period of it's whatever you want it to be, there was this idea that like all religions were sort of one religion, and Wicca was sort of this meta religion, and you could just sort of plug different deities in because, you know, the screed at the time was it's all the same thing, which was sort of a weird, it was a weird kind of holdover from like theosophy that's had, you know, where it was just sort of this universal spirit and we could define it however we wanted. Where it wasn't appropriative is that there weren't practices or traditions being taken by Wiccans and denied access to, you know, nothing. At the time, people were cutting practices out of Wicca. You know, it was, you know, oh, we don't have to cast a circle because the world is already sacred, which translated to, I don't feel like doing it. And that ritual nudity. Oh no, this is for families. We all wear robes, And then we just wear street clothes because we're all equal. And it would people would find ways.
Devil, that's just cake.
I'm going to start saying that next time I get some fundamentalists after me on the TikTok. I'm going to be like, okay. But people were really kind of sanitizing Wicca and cutting practices out of it, and so they weren't bringing in practices from other cultures or other traditions and calling it Wiccan, but they were kind of all gods are one god. So you would have I knew people who were like, oh, my patron goddess is Yemaya, and I'm like, okay, middle-aged white lady from the suburbs, that's an interesting choice. But she wasn't going home to the suburbs and like pretending to practice voodoo. She just had a Yemaya statue on her altar. And so it's like, was it offensive? Yeah, quite a bit, especially in terms of the very fanciful takes on actual history, but it was never really appropriative. People started seeing Wicca as appropriative. Honestly, I think like in the early 2010s on Tumblr is apparently where it started, where somebody learned the term cultural appropriation and they didn't like Wicca, so they just conflated the two. And from there, and the phrase that you hear, especially on TikTok now, is Wicca was created in the 1950s through the 1970s, depending on who you ask. But it was created. It was created 50 years ago by a man, and then long pauses on camera, who cherry-picked clothes practices from indigenous cultures. And then you say, okay, which cultures? Hoodoo? No, there's no hoodoo. Well, indigenous Native American? No, there's none of that in Wicca. And it all kind of falls apart because they're just repeating the tagline, and it's currently trendy to hate on Wicca. So that's the kind of, people just kind of pass that little phrase along, and it's going to continue up until I was going to say it's going to continue until next year when Wicca starts trending again because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I was going to say, Wicca seems to go through this up and down of people like them, people don't. They're in it as if they're like the Nickelback of paganism.
That's a really good way. Yeah, it's like if Nickelback put out "Living La Vida Loca," that would be Wicca. It's like huge for a moment, and then, but and thank you for indulging my like you push the Wicca button and all the invective comes out. But no, it does kind of go through ups and downs, and it's really kind of dependent on whatever's going on in pop culture at the time. Like
that
with
tracks.
Like when the movie The Craft came out, that's interest in witchcraft in general spiked. And then with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they started kind of mainstreaming the word Wicca. So then Wicca got kind of trendy again. Mm-hmm. But, as different shows came out, the reason why so many pagans of European descent suddenly all started calling themselves hoodoo root workers was because of the movie The Skeleton Key. They were like, oh, that's new. Let's go find out what that is.
I don't think I've seen that. The Skeleton Key?
I
don't think I've seen that.
It is a brilliant movie starring Kate Hudson, who is a very she's a very idealistic young woman who's wants to go to nursing school, and she lives in New Orleans. She gets a job as kind of a live-in caretaker for a guy who's had an older man who's had a stroke, and so she has to go move into their old plantation house where they live way out in the swamp. And the longer she's there, the more strange things are happening, and she realizes that there's like a hoodoo curse on the property, and there are insane plot twists. And I made my elderly parents watch it, and it traumatized them, and it's just a fun movie.
I'm Googling it now so I don't forget.
Definitely worth a watch.
Film. Yeah, I've not seen this.
It did introduce the concept of hoodoo to a greater pagan audience, and so there was sort of this surge of interest in it. And people who had been interested in Wicca dropped Wicca because it wasn't cool anymore and started calling themselves root workers, and were just grabbing whatever they could. And there was an online course at the time from a company called the Lucky Mojo Curio Company. You could take their online course, and people were signing up for the course. Yeah, people were signing up for the course to get the training materials, and then just plagiarizing it, or like uploading big chunks of it to their personal websites. And then 10 years later, people are like, "You can't practice hoodoo; it's cultural appropriation." But then they would start talking about their personal practices, and it was all stuff from Lucky Mojo, because nobody wrote down, "Oh, I'm stealing this from Lucky Mojo." It got passed down as quote traditional witchcraft when very little of it is.
Mm-hmm. And, I will say,
I have a lot of hot buttons. Who knew?
Yeah, you do. I came up in my practices, experimenting. It was really when I started meeting people who were practicing in the ATRs, the African traditional religions, hoodoo and voodoo, and I can't even think of all the names of them anymore. I knew someone else who was in Quimbanda, an initiated priestess there, and they all really taught me how to practice ancestor veneration in a way that I had never even been taught before, been exposed to before.
Oh yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it was just the books I had access to, but coming up in the 90s, Samhain was the time people talked about ancestors, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I met those guys. Those people are they're the ones that exposed me to the wider thought that this is a constant part of your practice.
Yeah,
that they might be your strongest allies.
Absolutely. No, I learned something very similar from a friend of mine who passed away several years ago, but who was a Lukumi initiate, which is what a lot of people call Santeria. People from Cuba will call it Lukumi. And he was, I think he was initiated into Palomayombe, and but he also had a very well-grounded pagan practice as well. And he was very big on not only the ancestors of like our family line, but kind of, for lack of a better way of saying it, our chosen ancestors. So like the ancestors of the queer community, and the ancestors of our chosen families. And one thing he said something in passing that like revolutionized the way I thought about a lot of stuff. When you mentioned Samhain, one day he was just like, "Well, Beltane is Samhain in the underworld." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, because up here we think of Samhain as when the dead come back to see us, and Beltane is when the spirits are actually, like, they're saying goodbye to spirits who are coming back up to be reborn. And at Samhain, we're saying goodbye to spirits who have passed away and are on the way to the underworld." And I was like, that is quite brilliant. So it always stuck with me in terms of, nothing is static, and there isn't just one time of the year to think about those who have gone on. It's just a constant cycle.
Yeah, but say I've got I have daily stuff that I do, and ancestors are part of that veneration every single day, and offerings. And then I have a more formal ancestors specific, and really the more formal ancestor specific ritual I do at least once a month are more to those ancestors of witchcraft, of heathenry, of druidry, of the people who took all the chances and literally risked their lives, reputations, and jobs to bring us the material that gave us a start. For as bad as some of it may have been, I still think it's important to understand the risk that these people faced, even in the modern era. The 80s and 90s were not a safe time to be an out practicing pagan of any kind. Not at all. You put your family in danger in a lot of places by even wearing a pinnacle in public. And I think that is long. I think that's sadly forgotten.
That is one thing I try to talk about on TikTok quite a bit, is the satanic panic, because I got to grow up in the middle of it. And, not to show off all my Gen X curmudgeonly, belief heritage.
Where our trauma.
We're when I was a kid, we had to walk 6 miles to worship Satan. But it was such an insane period where literally anything could be considered a possible gateway to Satanism. And it's funny today to see younger generations who will say things like, not to keep harping on the same thing, but they're like, somebody called me Wiccan today. I'm so tired of having to deal with that. And I'm like, when I was your age, we got called Satanists.
Yeah.
And we weren't allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons because it was devil worship. And it was such a weird time. And like, I remember growing up, we had this little like charcoal gray tabby. His name was Shadow. We loved him. He was a red cat. But my mom wouldn't let him outside on Halloween. And she was like, remember to keep the cat in. And I was like, why do we have to keep the cat in? She said, oh, because the roving bands of Satanists like to kidnap black cats on Halloween and sacrifice them. So if we let him out, the Satan, and she was just like, lucid and sane. And, but it was just understood that in the suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas, there were some Satanists behind the garage or something. And if they saw the cat, it was game over.
Yeah, game over. Sorry,
and we were just like, oh, that's good point. Good point. The Satanist behind the garage. I would never look there. Thanks for saving the cat. But people don't realize how like just ingrained and commonplace that idea was, and how acceptable it was to believe that. Yeah. And the Scott Cunningham and Raymond Buckland and all these people who were like, going on Lori Cabot, going on talk shows, and, going on Donahue and Oprah. And just, I recently saw some clips where the host was turning to the audience. He was like, did you know that witches didn't worship Satan? And the audience was like, no, we didn't know that. But that was like, but you're right. How terrifying for the guest to be publicly, identifying as a witch at a time when so many bad things could have happened.
Right. I mean, when I was 16, it would have been 93, and my car was vandalized because they thought I was a Satanist one time in the high school parking lot. The backseat of my car, you could see, like at that age and that time, the backseat of my car would have been the Dungeons and Dragons hardcover monster manual, the player's handbook, a copy of the Magus, Francis Bacon. Is that right? Yeah. And the Satanic Bible, LaVey, because, a 16-year-old kid, 93 with long hair and a trench coat. Gotta have some LaVey. Scott Cunningham book, the Big Blue book, like anything I could get my hands on. And I had 2 books that were on Enochian magic or Enochian magic. I've never been sure how to say that. That was the collection of stuff in my backseat that led these people to think this kid's a Satanist.
Yeah.
And they vandalized my car. Like it wasn't necessarily safe even for me in a town in Illinois where, people think of Illinois as the big blue state in national elections, forgetting that's because 70% of the population is in Chicago and they tend to vote blue, but the rest of the state is full of trees, cows, and rednecks, corn and beans,
Well, that's something else that I think when we look back at some of the witchcraft books, especially in the mid to late 90s, which is where we saw the Irish potato goddess books and the Wiccan ritual format that was just sort of stamped onto all these different cultures, because you could find books on Egyptian witchcraft or Scottish witchcraft or Irish witchcraft.
And I did.
And it was all that kind of same Wiccan ritual format with just different god names plugged in. But not too much earlier than that, the options for witchcraft books were like Scott Cunningham sometime, 80s, late 80s, early 90s. You can find Scott Cunningham, and you could find some pastel New Age books, and then it would be like The Creepy Uncle's Guide to Summoning Demons. And so that's what we all read. And we all read the fluffy New Age stuff, and we all read, so you want to bang the devil, because that was just whatever we could find at the half-price books.
Yeah. Yeah, that's no joke. We had a Walden Books in the mall. May it rest in peace.
Walden Books. Walden Books and B. Daltons.
Sylvia Brown and lots of Scott Cunningham and astrology books. And yeah, I mean, that's what made it so refreshing to me when I was 17 when it happened, when a friend of mine who, I mean, he's since gone, Chuck Smith was his name. He was super obsessed with the Golden Dawn, and there was no Amazon or anything back then. I don't know how the fuck he found Lieber Nolan Psychonaut. I don't know where the fuck he got it. All I know is we were always playing D&D or Mage the Ascension or Werewolf the Apocalypse in this trailer out in nowhere, drinking underage, smoking weed, attempting magic, attempting astral projection projects, trying to, like, do all these psychic experiments and just fun shit that you do when you're a kid and you're actually doing this stuff. And he walks in one day and he hands me Lieber Knoll. I've still got the copy of that book. And he says, "This is some super dark shit, Lonnie. I think you'd like it."
Awesome.
Little did he know he was wrong about the dark shit. There's nothing like, it couldn't be that the notion of it just being dark and evil is just like, you read the title and got spooked.
Yeah.
Little did he know he was handing me the operating system for my lifetime of magic. That I no longer was interested in all the books available at Walden's. Didn't give a shit. I found what I was looking for. Like,
I was kind of a latecomer to chaos magic because I was very Discordian early on. When early 2000s, I read Drawing Down the Moon, the big Margot Adler magnum opus of paganism across the world. And she had a section on Discordianism and had interviewed one of the, at the time, surviving founders of Discordianism. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever heard of. Because when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Greek mythology. Because if you're a kid and you're obsessed with mythology, you're either going to grow up to be gay or a witch or both. And so, I chose option C. And I just loved Eris as a goddess as a kid. I thought, especially, I don't remember the name, but it was this big Greek mythology kind of illustrated guide that like every kid had. It was Baudelaire's or Du Baudelaire or something. And Eris looked so crazy and weird in that book, and I just thought she was great. So to find out that there was an actual religion based on her I was like, oh, I'm sold. And so it was years later that I kind of stumbled into chaos magic, kind of quite by accident, where a friend of mine mentioned that he was like, I'm really into chaos magic. And I was like, well, what can you tell me about it? He was like, well, I'll just show you. And so I ended up, and this is in the introduction to the book, so spoiler, but I ended up like lying naked on a massage table with these LED goggles on that were pulsing light into my eyes while like Hindustani trance music played in the background. And I was concentrating on a sigil, think of a design. And then at one point he like pulled the glasses off and like held the sigil over my face so it would like burn into my mind. And after, I was like, this is insane and I love it. And so
right?
he and I would just do, like, he'd be like, hey, I just used AI to create a sigil, but I also need to get a testosterone shot and I hate giving it myself. So why don't you give me the shot? And if I bleed, you can put the sigil on it, which is also in the book. That story's in there. Like, okay. Yeah. So we were like, but just all these crazy, like, discordant things or disjointed things that didn't seem like they would work together, but would get results.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was, and for me, that was like having not all rules are bad, like not like just pushing stuff out of the way, but like, I can kind of make my own rules a little bit, or I can break rules specifically to see what happens. And am I still going to get results if I break these rules? And just doing everything from an experimental point of view became really important.
That experimental thing is what I loved so much about it, because, I found runes at the same time, and there wasn't a lot out there on that either, but all I saw was like cooler ways that looked ancient and more powerful to my brain at 17 to make magic, right? And then all the ways you could play with technology and music, and just like you were using LED goggles and things like that, just the creative ways that people were going about it all. It's what makes me the worst person in any group or room when people want to do some traditional anything. My brain just says, no, fuck you. That's boring. In heathenry, people always want to reference the past, and I get it. You want something to live within a stream to make it more, I don't know, valid. I'm never quite entirely certain what an individual is seeking when they're so obsessed with wanting to match up with something in ye old pre-conversion days. But I think, well, the coolest thing about the people back then was, if we know anything, we know that they were innovative. They were very creative. They were constantly taking things away from other cultures by force and just by learning and trade sometimes, that improved their own conditions in life. I've no doubt whatsoever that you could, if I could go back in time to any period that had a wizard, a witch, a shamanic priest, or something, anything, you pick it, and I bring them to our time, let them have a panic attack at all the noise, and then and then take them to Walmart and show them just the candle section.
Oh,
they're gonna flip their shit.
Lose their minds over the candles.
Yeah, like, stop getting hung up on all the. I mean, I get it. For some folks, that's what you need to get in the mood. But
that's another one of those. A friend of mine did a presentation recently that was, I don't remember the title, but it was kind of all about how modern pagan thought was so heavily influenced by theosophy, like I mentioned earlier. And one of the theosophical ideas,
of Thorn Mooney.
Yes,
Thorn will tell you all the secrets.
yes, I adore Thorn. I am terrified of Thorn, and I adore Thorn. We get along very well that way.
I love Thorn.
Oh, they're amazing. But one of the things with theosophy is that there was this idea that, like, Helena or Madame Blavatsky was channeling these messages from these ancient ascended masters, and there was sort of this utopia in the past, and we have to go back to that way of living, and everything was great before we messed it all up, and that idea just sort of filtered through. And so pagans today and occultists today who get so caught up in the old traditional way of doing things are really referencing that idea, even if they don't realize it. This idea that there was this utopian past, and that what goes along with that with theosophy is that, and some of us are a little more utopian than others. And there was, I can't remember all the generations, but there was, like, one of them was the Atlantean generation, or the Atlantean civilization, or wave of people, and they were really, really, like, spiritual and powerful, but then they experienced hubris, and that civilization fell, and then the Aryan civilization grew out of that, or the Aryan race grew out of the Atlantean race. So the Aryan race was according to Blavatsky, was like the new next spiritual evolution. And the Aryan people were more spiritual than the Semitic people. And it was like, okay, now we're getting a little problematic with the theosophy.
Here comes some of my ignorance in history. Did fucking name that
Blavatsky.
person?
Yes.
Did they predate the Nazis?
Yes, they were, and they heavily influenced.
I fucking knew it. That rhymes so bad.
Yeah, they Theosophy was one of was it the Thule Society? That was like the Nazi occult, the occult arm of the Nazi party. They were heavily influenced by Theosophy. Pardon me. And Blavatsky's material, like the way I've described it before, it's like it was like, one day we're going to reclaim our utopian past, and humanity is going to be one large brotherhood where there is no class or race or gender. We're all equals, but it's in a very all lives matter kind of way. And
it sounds so awful to me, though.
Yeah.
No. No,
And
I don't want to be the same as everything else.
I don't either. But for as much as Blavatsky talked about, like, downloading these messages from the Ascended Masters, a lot of it was like, rewarmed Hinduism. And Theosophy was pulling ideas specifically from kind of Near Eastern cultures and Central Asian cultures or Southern Asian cultures, and kind of presenting it as this is the truth. We're still going to oppress those people because they're not white, right. But we're going to borrow their ideas. And that whole idea of the Aryan race, that the Nazis' obsession with that came directly from Theosophy. And today, if we want to have, if we want to kind of believe in a utopian past, or we want to say, the old ways are best or whatever, that's great. But it would kind of benefit us to decondition ourselves from the Theosophy aspect of that.
Yeah. And I mean,
it's good to know where our beliefs come from.
It might be good to pluck a thing here and there, obviously, from the past. We're all in paganism in one way or another, influenced or obsessed even with something in the past that inspired us, that attracts us, even if it's just the gods and goddesses themselves, right?
Yeah.
Or the art or something. I hope it doesn't get all the way into like the sacrificing part. But I do know an old heathen. He swears to me that anytime I don't know if they still do executions in Oklahoma or not, but according to him, they did. And he would like to go to the prison parking lot and dedicate old Sparky's ride to Odin every time.
Oh, wow.
Like,
that's
kind of
intense.
fucked up. And he'd be like, no, I like it this way. I'm like, okay. If you go to enough pagan events and meet enough people, all I'm saying is you're going to meet some pretty interesting folks.
Absolutely.
I
call those people, I call them the Gregs.
The Gregs.
Because somebody made a comment one time on, and it was something that came out of TikTok, where some older dude had made some comment that just sparked off a huge controversy. And it was very like, it came across as like poor people can't practice witchcraft. Like, I don't know if you've been on TikTok long enough to see this, but occasionally things will rise up about like the dollar store candles. You can't use dollar store candles in witchcraft. It's like,
why not?
Because you have to spend money, and it's like, I don't know, listen to that guy. But
it's that whole idea of pious poor or something.
Yeah, and
it's mixed up but twisted on itself to be like, you can't be poor.
Yeah. It's kind of that new age idea of you got to spend money to make money. If you're not buying the nice candles, then you're not really showing the gods that you care. It's like the gods don't care.
Becky with the good hair.
Exactly. But if somebody was like, oh, behold, it's our high overlord Greg, and like Greg with 2 G's, and it started this whole thing where I was like, every pagan community has a Greg, and Greg is a high priest. Nobody knows what Greg is a high priest of. Greg is claims to practice 5 different diasporic African traditional religions because he can't tell them apart.
Fuck yeah, Greg.
and I just made this whole series of videos about Gregs in the pagan community.
I love that.
So whenever there's the grumpy older dude who's why can't we have sacrifices? I'm like, calm down, Greg.
Calm down, Greg. Yeah, I love this. I'm gonna have to go find those videos. That sounds fun.
I will track them as I'm navigating I had to get a new phone recently, so I'm still learning, but I will find a way to send them to you.
Perfect. We went almost 40 minutes in before I even got to the first question I like to ask a new guest. And I'm not going to let it slide. Off on rants. And that's perfect. I'm not going to let it slide, though, because it's something that I love to ask, especially those who practice witchcraft and the occult in any way, shape, or form, because no one ever asks us this. Have you ever experienced a haunting or anything that we would call paranormal phenomena?
I have.
Do tell.
Not necessarily. I'm trying to think of it from a hunting point of view. Okay, the one hunting experience I had, a friend of mine years ago lived in this 2-story duplex, this in kind of old ramshackle building, and I was crashing. We'd gone out one night, and I was young enough to where I was still drinking and still partying, and I crashed in his. He had a roommate, so we were both in his bedroom. He was on his bed. I was on a futon, kind of curled up in a little ball. And I got up. I had to get up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. Like, couldn't find the door, couldn't find the doorknob. It was a whole drunkenness adventure, having to wake him up to help me get out of the room. Got back, did my business, got back on the futon, went back to sleep, and I woke up, I guess, a few hours later, and I was like, why is he standing next to his bed? And he was just standing there, kind of, it looked like he was like looking at the wall. And I was like, that's odd. Maybe he's sleepwalking. And then I looked at his bed and he was in bed. And I was like, okay, I've been drinking. This is, you're not seeing anything. Let it go. Right. And as I'm trying to just like, just assuming this is some sort of like, drinking dream, my friend goes, dude, I told you the door's over there. And he started talking to the figure standing next to the bed.
Oh,
so I just pulled the covers over my head and went back to sleep. And the next morning I mentioned it to him, and he just looked at me and he kind of stared at me for a while. He said, I told you this place is haunted. I was like, okay.
I like his attitude about it. He's just like,
he was very nonchalant.
Leave me the fuck alone. Go over there.
Well, he thought it was me. He thought I was standing there. Okay. He thought I couldn't get out of the bedroom again. So yeah, that was the one, the one time I can safely say I saw a ghost. Okay. In terms of other stuff, before we started recording, I've friends and I have experimented with the Estes method and doing kind of like, radio-based mediumship. Other than that, most of my experiences have been decidedly more on the occult side. But I am always kind of have my fingers crossed that I'll find the goat bodies, or or something will happen. As of yet, not so much. But other than the one time that I do clearly remember seeing the ghost.
Yeah, I always hope that more occult practitioners experiment within the realm of the paranormal. Go to the abandoned haunted place in your area. Make sure there's no homeless people there and the floorboards are safe. And cast a circle.
Yeah.
And just sit in it. And then
I don't see why there would be
tune into your senses and see what pays attention to you.
I don't really understand why people would see the occult and the paranormal as two separate things.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Especially
if you're trying to contact spirits.
And maybe because we are Gen X and we grew up with the Time Life, those paranormal book series that lumped it all in together anyway.
Yeah. That could be, do you remember those commercials? They'd have the like unsolved mysteries guy talking, at least sound like him in my imagination now. And it shows somebody like they folded a hanger into this shape and pointed it at Stonehenge, and then gets hit with lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember, and there was it was a series of books, and you could order them I started to say order them online, but no, you had to,
no, you couldn't.
I know. Probably can now. But it was it it was either World of the Paranormal or World of the Occult or something, but there would be like a picture book on, like a coffee table book on wizards, and a coffee table book on UFOs, and a coffee table book on cryptids, and they were amazing. They were absolutely amazing.
Did not have them, but I saw the commercials. I remember seeing those infomercials for those books. Was told repeatedly, no, you can't have those. And
I checked them out from the library.
Yeah.
Just would go to the library and get them all.
How did you end up a Gardnerian high priest? What brought you to Gardnerian witchcraft rather than Scott Cunningham's just published "Do This Witchcraft"?
Absolute skepticism is what got me there.
Skepticism.
Absolutely. I got interested in witchcraft and the occult in my, like, when I was like 12, 13 years old, as we all do.
Yeah,
And when I later, like early college, was when I started kind of collecting the books of, DJ Conway, Celtic Magic, and Scott Cunningham. And yeah, we all got to start somewhere.
I did start on that specific book.
So many of us did. And so, but my first two books were Celtic Magic by DJ Conway and Scottish Witchcraft by Raymond Buckland, because my heritage is Scottish and Irish and English. And so I thought, oh, Scottish Witchcraft, that's me. And that particular book was, according to Buckland, he had met this guy named Aidan Brock, who was an old dude who lived out in the Highlands, who lived in his ancestral castle and would like handpick students to teach this ancient witchcraft of the Picts. And he initiated Buckland into his mysteries and then dropped dead. Like, he taught Buckland everything and then died.
And then died.
And then Buckland is now preserving his legacy.
Thank you, Mr. Buckland.
So I was reading this book and I was like, man, I want to believe. I want to believe. I want to believe. I did not believe in Mr. Aidan Brock, but I wanted to. And then I got a book called Witta, Witta, an Irish pagan tradition.
I remember that one.
Eden McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the book. That book is where 90s non-initiatory Wicca really jumped the shark, because she introduced the potato goddess. And there was a whole ritual you could do with a potato, because a potato, it grows under the ground, so it's the underworld, but it's also the great mother. And she had this whole thing about like ancient potato magic. And, all of his kids were reading this book, and all of us were like, potatoes come from South America, woman. Like, they are not ancient Irish root vegetables. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And so I was reading a lot of
potatoes.
Exactly. I was reading all these books and like I was doing my own thing, kind of putting together my own rituals, and I had a couple of friends that we kind of had a loose practice with. And it just was sort of something I would, and like, as much as I was like, I don't know, I feel like somebody probably did make this all up, because everything I'm reading is so fantastical and everything is so not really, like, I just don't believe that the ancient Celts and the ancient Egyptians were practicing the same religion.
Same.
And I just got to this point. I remember I was working kind of a dead-end office job, like the first of many dead-end office jobs. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to find a couple of like initiatory traditions of witchcraft and get initiated into a bunch of them, and maybe take some courses on herbalism and learn to read tarot. And I'm just going to be a professional witch. Why not?
Fuck yes.
And she was like, that's a great idea. And I know really, this was probably like late 2003, early 2004, where and we had the Witch's Voice in those days, Witch Fox, where you could find all those things.
Let's have a moment to remember Witch Fox.
Witch Fox.
I made a blog post about Witch Fox on weirdwebradio.com on the blog. I
will go find it.
More in full post.
I will pour tribute. And then of course we had Yahoo groups. And so I just started popping up in these witchcraft themed Yahoo groups, and I was like, hey, did Gerald Gardner make this up or not? Like, I was polite. I was like, somebody give me the lowdown. And I found
Doreen's help.
Yeah, no, Doreen was plugging away.
You gotta remember the grandmama of witchcraft.
Oh, that's the thing. No. It is. I say this all the time on social media, but it is all in our culture, in our patriarchal culture. It is always preferable to give attention to a man than give any credit to a woman. So people will always say Gardner made it up versus Doreen had anything to do with it. But I found this lovely group of people. It was a list called Email Witches, and they just kind of took me in and were very kind. And I was like, well, if Gardnerian witchcraft is a thing, that's where this all came from. So I want to go find it. And it was very like, I wasn't really trying to disprove anything. I was just like, there has to be something other than the Irish potato goddess, right? Like This had to come from somewhere. So
Yeah.
I got on the Witch's Voice, and I found that there was a Gardnerian group in my area, and I started an email correspondence, and they referred me to a Gardnerian high priest who didn't live too far away, and so he and I met a few times. And his coven, he had recently relocated to Houston. His coven was out of state, but we started an email group of our own, and I started interacting with them. And then one day they were like, "Hey, we would like to meet you in person, and there's a Sabbath coming up, so why don't you come out?" So I hopped on a plane and emailed somebody I'd never met in person and said, "I'm wearing a green and white striped shirt."
Oh my goodness! How far did you go?
Car pulled up about 1,500 miles away. I went to California for the first time, Texas to California, and I landed in Northern California, and a car pulled up, and there was a nice looking woman in the car with a little Yorkapoo dog. And I just got in the car, and I was like, I will probably not get murdered. This is probably not an elaborate setup. And so I met the whole coven, and we hung out for a couple of days. And at the end of it, they were like, "So why are you here?" And I was like, "To present myself as a candidate for initiation." And they said, "Okay, well, then we're going to do that." And so got initiated, got schlepped back to Houston. And so I literally flew to the Sabbath 4 times a year. I spent the next year or so just every 3 months hopping a flight to California to be with the coven. Eventually we started getting more students in Houston. And so all of us were like making this pilgrimage with a group of us, and we finally ended up hiding off. And it just really kind of clicked with me. It just really, just seeing it, it's kind of a cliche, but kind of seeing it from the inside gave me a whole different perspective. And I was like, oh, okay, this now it makes sense. And I doing things the way that Gardner and Valiente did made me kind of appreciate all of it a lot more.
Yeah. One thing I'm sure of is, we've talked about Wicca a lot in the public perception of it over the years. I think from within, I've never been a Wiccan a day in my life, but I understand it as much as I can. And as much as I've talked to people who are Gardnerian priests and priestesses and priestesses and practitioners, like, there's very clearly some deep spiritual meaning and efficacy and everything in Wicca when you do it the way it was built to be done.
Yeah. And it's funny, I just recently saw there's someone on TikTok, and I can't remember their name, and I wish I could plug them, and I can't. I know Darklight is in their name, but they've been posting old clips of interviews with Gardner and with Lori Cabot and with Patricia Crowther that are amazing. And I will make sure you get them as well, because I know you would get a huge kick out of these clips. But there was a clip today of Patricia Crowther kind of explaining, she was like, okay, the thing with Wicca, and this clip was probably from like the early 80s. And she was like, okay, Wicca is not really a thing. It's a very convenient word for people who don't want to say witchcraft. And she's like, it's kind of grammatically incorrect because etymologically it would mean a male, when Wicca with an E at the end would be female, but nobody's really paying attention to that. And she's like, it's a convenient word. But it's good to remember that, like, the early practitioners of what we now call Wicca did not call it Wicca. They just called it witchcraft. In Witchcraft Today, Gardner mentions that the people who initiated it called themselves the Wicca, W-I-C-A. And for years, people thought that was a spelling error. But in his books, he also references Wicca as the root of the word witch, with 2 C's. So, like, what became known as the Gardnerian tradition was the Wicca with 1 C, who were this group of people practicing witchcraft. And it really wasn't until Alex Sanders came along and popularized the term Wicca with 2 C's that the name kind of stuck. Prior to like 1971, anyone involved with it was just saying they practiced witchcraft.
Gotcha. So it's Alex Sanders' fault.
A little bit that one. There was he gave he kind of appeared on the scene after Gerald Gardner died. And a lot of people don't remember him, and that's a shame because so many people blame Gardner for things Sanders said and did. But Alex Sanders, approached a couple of Gardnerian covens for initiation and was turned away. Patricia Crowther specifically.
Did they say why?
He rubbed Patricia Crowther the wrong way for whatever reason.
Oh.
I can't remember which book it's in of hers, and she was a prolific author, but in one of them she just sort of mentioned this young upstart. But he found somebody to initiate him, and then he just disappeared. And then Gerald Gardner passed away, and the year after Gardner died, Alex Sanders appeared on the scene as calling himself the King of the Witches. Yes. And he claimed that his grandmother had initiated him in her kitchen when he was 7 years old.
Oh, those witchy grandmas, man. They were everywhere.
They were. Oh. Sidebar, when my grandmother passed away, we went to her funeral in a little small southern town, and we walked into the funeral home, and on top of her casket was a giant inverted pentagram. And I just grabbed my mother and was like, start talking. And she was like, oh,
fuck yeah.
She was Eastern Star. She was involved with the Masons. And so the florist made the Eastern Star symbol is an inverted pentagram. So the florist made a big inverted pentagram for my Methodist grandmother's funeral. And I was like, don't get me wrong, I'm sad and all, but I'm going to milk the hell out of this.
Fuck yeah, you are.
There I was at my grandmother's funeral. But so Sanders claimed his grandmother initiated him. What he had really done was taken the Gardnerian materials that he had been exposed to and fleshed them out with a lot of Golden Dawn, and through Golden Dawn with a lot of Enochian stuff. So that's like where the idea of when you hear the Guardians of the Watchtowers is an Enochian idea that the Golden Dawn was using that ended up in Alexander's version of witchcraft.
Oh,
he brought in the 4 elements. There wasn't really, like within Gardnerian witchcraft, there's not really elemental correspondences.
See, I didn't know that.
Everything's kind of more seasonal on that side of things. But within Alexandrian witchcraft, the elements are very important. And Sanders, when he would tour around and he would give these lectures, and somebody wrote them all down and published a book of them, in which he talks about being one of the Wicca, where like Gardner would say the Wicca, but there was one C in the transcripts of Sanders' lectures. It's the Wicca with 2 C's. And then when Stuart Farrar, who was a student of Sanders, started publishing books like What Witches Do, and he and his wife wrote the Witch's Bible, they dropped the "the," so it was just Wicca. So it was really, when people say Gerald Gardner invented Wicca, I'm like, nope, Stuart Farrar did. That's sort of how that word developed, is that and then it kind of stuck. So you have people like Patricia Crowther, who were initiates of Gerald Gardner, saying, we might as well just use it. Why not? And then today people will go, well, Gerald Gardner invented Wicca. I'm like, no, he fucking didn't. That's not where that word comes from.
Oh, boy.
He didn't even come up with the term Gardnerian. That was an insult originally.
Well, I mean, I wish those were the kind of arguments I had to have with the origins of heathenry in America and stuff. Instead, I got to explain how, they were all crazy fucking racists on cocaine and wanted to be
I choked and coughed and laughed at the same time and made a...
That doesn't mean we do.
We all hit those moments where it's, within the witchcraft spaces, people will say, well, Gerald Gardner was racist. And I'm like, absolutely not. He was like fighting for like human rights in Borneo and in his youth. And then he was a member of the Citizens Brigade in England, and he was making Molotov cocktails to throw at Nazis. And they're like, well, he was homophobic. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally. He was horribly homophobic. You are absolutely correct. Can't deny that. We got to pick our battles sometimes.
You got to pick your battles. Yeah. I can find nothing really to defend those early heathen dudes. They can all just be forgotten as far as I'm concerned. The sooner the better. And some of them are living.
I know there is that. That's always kind of, well, maybe we take that theosophy idea and we just kind of turn our frown upside down and we just sort of skip over them in the great history of things.
Yeah,
we're gonna look to the distant past that completely overshadows that particular group.
That's right. Yeah, we'll skip you. We'll go back to the people that did human sacrifice and raided villages.
Yeah,
who would have also been on
medium.
cocaine given the opportunity. I'm sure of it.
Yet, I do not doubt that there would have been cocaine Vikings.
There's a history rewrite for you.
Well, we had Cocaine Bear. There was a trend in movies, a bunch of horror for a while for cocaine and everything.
If there's not, there will be.
There was Meth Raccoon was a movie, so we just need to do Cocaine Vikings. Ketamine Meth Vikings.
Yikes!
That's a movie. It's on the TV.
So.
But I present myself as like well educated and knowledgeable, and I will watch horrible B-rated horror movies until my eyes bleed. And
that's fair. We all have to have our thing. I will stop and look at the cheesiest, shittiest, dumbest Halloween decoration anywhere I encounter them, as if it's the greatest treasure I've ever discovered.
Oh, this gets confessional. Are you familiar with a company called Ray Dunn?
Ray Dunn?
Ray Dunn. R-A-E.
Ray.
First name, Dunn, D-U-N-N. Ray Dunn was originally an artist out of California. She was a ceramic artist out of California originally, who has now become this brand. If you ever go to like TJ Maxx or Marshalls or Home Goods and you find like a coffee mug that's sort of artisan looking and it says coffee in a whimsical script, or a plate that says dinner.
Plate?
And
no.
Or sometimes it'll just say plate.
Yeah.
And I just thought I got obsessed with it randomly several years ago. And they always put out Halloween decorations. They always have Halloween collections that range from like whimsical to deranged. Like I've got this gnome that sits on my dining table. It's just like the gnome head and his cute little hat. And on the front in this like Comic Sans font, it says harvest. And my whole apartment is full of Ray Dunn Halloween things.
I love it.
So you can, I cannot judge. I cannot judge your Halloween decorations.
And if it's going to be this random company, this, like there's a company called Archie McPhee. They're out of I think Seattle, and they make the dumbest fucking shit ever, and I love them.
they make underwear for your hands.
The finger like gnomes and weird finger cats.
They make fingerless gloves that are underwear gloves.
Yes,
they make insane Christmas ornaments.
Yes, you're in time to order for the holidays, folks. I promise you, Archie McPhee has something fun for your stocking stuffers, guaranteed.
We've got to get them and Ray Dunn to sponsor this show. That will be brought to you by these crazy, wacky companies. I love them. I wish them enormous success. I also have a Ray Dunn. It just sits in my living room year round, and it's like a little ceramic pumpkin that says trick, and it was supposed to be part of a set, like trick or treat, but I didn't buy. They didn't have the treat pumpkin. They just had the trick pumpkin, and I saw it, and I was like, it's a slutty gay pumpkin, and I just fell in love with my slutty gay pumpkin, and he lives in my living room now.
Nice, I like that. Slutty gay pumpkin. Okay. I was on TikTok earlier, and it showed me I thought it was a rubber ducky, but I think it's resin now. But it was a demonic duck that looked like a rubber duck, but it was resin, of course, a little bitty thing. It was only like $4, which made me not want to buy it because I thought, how can it only be $4?
Yeah, that always gets me. That I'm always like, I'll find something. I'm like, oh man, I'm not gonna be able to afford that. $5, I'm not buying that cheap crap.
I know. I was just like, is that gonna break?
Yeah.
So if any of you have this demon duck from TikTok shop, send me a picture and I'll believe it's real.
I wonder if there's free samples. I'll try to get a free sample. I will test drive the resin demon duck for you.
I'm down. What a great thing to say. I will test drive the demon duck. Well, we've gotten a little over an hour now, so I think it's a good spot to start wrapping things up. Unless there's something that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get into, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think we kind of covered all of it. Once I started confessing my love of Ray Dunn, and I went on 5 different rants about witchcraft.
Yeah.
So
He's clearly comfortable.
I got on here and I was like, you have ADHD, you're going to stay focused, you're going to stay calm. And then I'm like, and another thing I don't like about Kiss today. So
nah, it's all good.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Where can people find you?
People can find me at thumperforge.com. They can also, I am everywhere on almost all the socials at Fivefold Law, which is also Law. Yeah, one word. And then I took a little break from blogging, but I'm blogging again for Pathos Pagan, and that blog is also called Fivefold.
Oh, Pathos and all their fucking ads. Ugh.
They're getting better. They're getting better.
Goddamn pop-ups are insane. Make them stop.
I'll see what I'll work my magic. I'll see what I can do.
And let's remember to plug the book, The Chaos Apple.
Yes, The Chaos Apple: Magic and Discordianism for the Postmodern Witch, which will be, I know that if you pre-order it, it comes out November 8th. It'll arrive November 10th, but I think it might show up in bookstores before then. And then I am going all the way to Cleveland to a little bookshop called October's. I will be there the first weekend of November, and that's where my book launch will be.
Very nice. It's not still a few months away, but I intend to be at, what is it called? Between the Worlds Sacred Space.
Sacred Space, yeah.
Conference in Maryland in February. I will be there at the Backup Hotel. Damn it.
Sometimes the backup hotel is better. Like, I have been at conferences where I had the backup hotel and I got to you're like, this is great. Oh, the energy is so amazing. And then you just get to hide from all of it for a little while.
I'm down for that sometimes. Yeah. But I will be there if y'all want to hang out. You'll find me there. I'm just going to be a dude. I was asked to be on a presentation thing, whatever. And I said, no, I just want to be a dude. So I'm just going to be a dude. Easy to find because I'm sure I'll have shirts on that say Weird Web Radio on the back.
Please make sure they put dude on your name tag. I'm just
a dude. All right. Thank you so very much for being here. This has been a blast.
I had a hoot and a half. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm glad. For everyone else that out there listening, thank you so much for listening to the show. Please spread it, share it. Let all your friends know that you enjoyed it, and get the message out there. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you're going to have to go to weirdwebradio.com, click join the membership, or go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio. All right. Stay weird out there, my friends. And now it's bonus audio time. Thumper Forge, are you ready?
I am. I have thoughts and opinions. Bring it.
They always say they're ready. First question is always the same. What famous person's resting place do you most want to visit, and why? And they don't have to be like Hollywood famous, just famous in something you love.
That is a really good question.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions and magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.